I make a multiplayer mod for Ratchet and Clank 1, and so I spent a lot of time digging through the game. Here's one fact I've learned for every level in the game. The ship you use to travel between levels is apparently a load-bearing object that every level needs to have. This means that even on the very first level where you can't travel to and from other levels, there's a ship hidden far out of bounds. Everything in a level that can move and execute code, like enemies, crates, these fighter jets, these platforms, and a bunch of other stuff, are what Insomniac called Mobies, typically known as game objects in modern game engines. There are also invisible Mobies that control things like the weather on some planets, spawn points, and generally stuff that may need some kind of control object, some kind of centralized control. In-engine cutscenes are controlled directly by a part of the game engine specifically made for playing cutscenes, just like you'd expect. However, it seems like there were some limitations to the cutscene player, and in the first cutscene that plays when you get to Novalis, there's an invisible Mobie that controls the crash and particle effects. If we delete this Mobie, the cutscene plays without these effects. All Mobies have their own memory area for variables that they need to keep track of, like health for enemies, velocity data for elevators, which path the ship should follow, and similar plumbing, like memory pointers to other objects they need to reference. We call this a Mobies PVARs. When they spawn in on Iridia, Skid for some reason writes the string Surfer Agent to his PVARs, and Skid's agent writes the string MacGuffin Surfer to his PVARs. These strings don't show up anywhere else in the game, and as far as I can tell, serves absolutely no purpose. If they needed to reference each other in code, they would just directly use memory pointers instead. On Kerwan, there are Fred Mobies placed across the level that don't seem to do anything. The first thing they do when they spawn in is just do some calculations that don't seem to do anything, and then it deletes itself. There's also a robo-dog placed on the level that in code just automatically is deleted when it spawns in. On Eudora, there's some random level geometry placed far outside of the bounds right here. On Blark Station, the ship that you go to with the shuttle is not actually there in the level. The actual place is right next to this room. On top of this, while the shuttle is moving, Ratchet is not actually on the shuttle, but is frozen right in front of the ship. You can find Quark hanging around on Rilgar by clipping through this wall. Presumably, Insomniac put him in the level to make sure there was enough memory for him to be used in the in-engine cutscenes, since they're rendered in real time using the 3D models. When you see him on the television here, his actual 3D model is used and he's literally inside the TV. And on the PS3 HD collection, you can kind of see him clipping out just a little bit. If you clip into some of the walls on Umbris, you can see a collection of weird morphed crates that you can't break. These are control Mobies that Insomniac used to manage the circling mines. Manager objects like these are often used to manage Mobies that need some kind of coordination, but Umbris is the only level where they've assigned them an actual 3D model for some reason. There's a skill point on Battaglia to kill the 4 tanks using the Sonic Summoner. However, for some reason the game is coded so that you can get the skill point by only killing specifically the last 2 tanks with the Sonic Summoner. Debug logging in the game for some reason calls the pilot helmet pilot hat, which I think is very funny. The pilot helmet is also the only item pickup that isn't a separate object when you pick it up from when you equip it. All other items that you can pick up are fully separate Mobi IDs for the version you pick up from the version you actually equip and wear. Due to an error in the code, the nanotech vendor requires you to have one more bolt than the nanotech actually costs in order to buy it. It still only takes the required amount from you, but you're not allowed to buy it unless you have one extra bolt. When you get to Bob in the sewers for the first time in a playthrough, he sets your spawn point to this location with an absolutely absurd rotation which unwinds to give Ratchet insane speed. He sets your spawn point to the position of a cuboid ID configured in his Mobi PBars. Cuboids are basically cube volumes that the level developers can use to create boundaries, or they just use them as locations they could move in their editor. However, in Bob's PBars, the cuboid ID is set to -1, so instead of getting the location and rotation of a cuboid, it looks at what's right in front of the first cuboid in memory. This happens to be a spline instead, and the memory layout of a spline happens to align with the cuboid's memory layout enough that the position makes sense, but the rotation is essentially garbage data. You can enter this turret from underneath it, because it only checks that you are within its X and Y coordinates and checks a timer that counts how many frames Ratchet has been grounded. Due to a bug affecting certain surfaces, the code for this timer is skipped altogether when you're over the surface, and so it isn't being reset and also doesn't count up anymore, effectively freezing the timer at what it was when you started being over it. Those familiar with Ratchet speedruns will also know about ILJs and cineflips. This timer bug is also what enables these on Rilgar and Umbris. There are a bunch of crates placed in the middle of nowhere. If you turn around quickly when you respawn here, you can just about see them fall down. After they've fallen down, you can still see the nanotech particles hang around down there. Sadly, you can't collect the nanotech in this state. By looking at some old design documents for Ratchet & Clank, there used to be a section here that was cut from the final game. There used to be a force field here, like you can see in other parts of this level, and the cut section was supposed to let you gain height to shoot down the tower. We can also see this in a prototype dated August 2nd, 2002. These robot soldiers, called foot soldiers in the code despite not having any feet, can cause a bug in Ratchet's jumping animations. If you pass all of them on this branch of the level up until this point without killing them, then Ratchet's animation will start behaving weirdly. I couldn't figure out why, but it's somehow caused by the foot soldiers returning to their hatches. The weird animation stops occurring when they emerge from the hatches and starts again once they start returning to the hatches. The lasers in the water section of Core 2 use the same model as the base Spider-Bot in Going Commando. The only difference is that the Going Commando Spider-Bot has a white texture on its body instead of this dark one. This is the only gold bolt in the game that instantly collects without an animation. It is the exact same Mobi as regular gold bolts, but it has a property set in its Mobi PBars that enables instant collection. If we enable this property on other gold bolts, they get the same behavior. The water in this part of the level has this texture. You normally don't see it in the game because it sets its draw distance to 0 and mode to invisible on the very first frame after spawning in on the level. If we have Mobi updates disabled when respawning on a level, we can see the texture in-game. Similarly, the water at the start of the level has this way less cool texture that you can see in normal gameplay if you open the pause menu on the very first frame after respawning. A lot of the Mobies in the game have large single update functions that aren't broken up into smaller functions like you do in good modern code. It's no surprise that Drek's update function is one of the largest single functions in the game, only beaten by movement codes, and, for some reason, an unused Mobi update function that looks like an early version of the amoeboids. As a side note, I tried to get this unused supposed amoeboid update function to run, but it just crashes the game. There's a similar early version of the Pokitaru Resort guide that actually does run. By looking at Drek's update function, we can see that he truly is the arbiter of everything that happens in the final boss fights. He controls the phase transitions, the cutscenes, and his attacks. So instead of a clean separation like you'd expect in modern games, he is the boss AI, cutscene controller, and level scripts all in one.
We can also see this in a prototype dated August 2nd, 2002.